So before the mentorship, I was actually just kind of post-grad student from a college that where I studied art and design, specifically in 3D animation, and it kind of wasn't really didn't have a direction. I wasn't kind of sure where I was going. I kind of took a one lighting course through CGMA, which kind of led me sort of into this direction, and sort of how we sort of met was through a lot of the Discord channels that came from that. And so before that, like I was still kind of experimenting and understanding like which direction I wanted to head in. And then you had reached out. I was like, this sounds like a good deal, but at the time I was kind of like not in the best place to really do it. But you had reached out again a couple months later, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take the dive. I'm gonna do it. And then I did, and I think I was part of the mentorship for about 3 months at that point. So yeah. So my main hesitation mainly was financial reasons and also just because I've already had like a degree and I've already taken like other courses and the main hesitation was sort of the thought of why bother throwing more money at something if these other things never really worked out in particular. It's not that they didn't work out, it's just I wasn't applying myself as much. But that's sort of where my thoughts were was I don't want to keep like throwing my money at something that isn't guaranteed anything. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm happy I decided to take the plunge and went for it. I think that's really what made this mentorship a lot different was that there was a lot of focus on the technical parts, which really helped under made me understand how light actually works rather than just trying to make something look pretty. Um, and I think that vastly improved what I was working on. And also having the direct feedback and the small community that we had to kind of just talk about our own things with each other was really helpful. To have like that group session, that group critique session was also very helpful. To really understand composition was really good. Um, so a lot of it was like uh, trying to find points of interest and story and trying to highlight those areas. I think was a lot really beneficial part of it. Um, yeah, and then also just kind of like the group that I worked with, like even though maybe we're not like the closest of people, but we're still like networking with each other. I think that was an important part too. So you get to work alongside people who you may end up working with sometime in the future. The something I was not understanding before was like again the technical parts of things like the intensity of light, luminosity, lux values, shadow ratios. These things were not like in my repertoire or my vocabulary before I even started this. So exposure value, things like that. After Lighting Bot, I mean, there's a few things I obviously have accomplished and achieved, but I think one of the most important things was being able to look at my work and know what's working and what's not working. I think that was probably the most important thing I learned. Yeah, it was funny because we were talking about specifically like what my favorite pieces were, stuff like that, and I was talking about the one before I joined the mentorship just to like let like more of a setup of like this is when I understood I wanted to keep going forward with this kind of like profession. But then he was able to kind of like look at my portfolio and then he was I asked like, okay, anything else like that you like? And I was like, oh, over here. And I told him like where I started Lighting Bot, and he was like, yeah, I could definitely tell. He was able to split my portfolio in half. And he's like, I could definitely tell from this point over was before you started that mentorship, where this point over you did start that mentorship. And there was a very clear divide in my portfolio that he was able to see. So it was kind of wild to be like, oh yeah, that's like a visual difference other people are seeing. Even if you're not really seeing it yourself, other people will see it. Much faster. Definitely. So I think one of the first maps that I worked on with you was that underground subway map, which I really still really like that one. And that one took me about 2 weeks to kind of work on and finesse, understand like color mixing, gradients, placing lights in certain areas and stuff like that. And then recently I just did another map, um, and that one took me not even really a full day, honestly. It was over the weekend, but I like broke up the hours over the weekend, and I was able to get a nice successful piece out of it that even like the hiring manager at one of the studios was able to notice like that it was part of the latter half of after I learned those skills. So with that being like so quick to just be able to light something and get something visually appealing done in such a short amount of time has been a big success. Yeah, it was definitely a more positive experience because it kind of like let me become happy with the maps or the projects that I was working on. In other courses, it was very much a one project a week with a specific focus, which was nice, but it was also kind of like I remember distinctly a couple projects where I was just like I was not happy with the result, but I had to turn it in regardless. So it was like I just needed to get something done, and I didn't really like that feeling. So at least with this, it was there was no real expectations to have something done by a specific amount of time. It was done when you said it was done. Yeah, yeah. I think with having a weekly meeting, it kind of like it did allow a little bit of something like a fire under your butt to kind of be like, all right, at least have something, even if it's not a lot, have something to show and talk about, or be ready to talk about other people's stuff, and you can apply what you learn from other people's projects to your own projects and vice versa. So I think that was also a nice thing is that when you have like these weekly meetings, it kind of like lets you think like, oh, I would like to have something to show, even if it's not a lot. Like I still want to keep working, and you're gonna progress at whatever rate you decide to progress at. But you'll never digress, I think is the good way to put it. Um, I think what it does is it combines a lot of that. Like I've heard of mentorships where there's a lot of autonomy, where it's kind of very very self-directed and not a lot of structure to it. So I think Lighting Bot brings in a lot of that structure while also giving you that autonomy to sort of direct your own work, which I think is really really nice. So it's not too structured, but it's also not like so loose that you kind of like forget that it's even happening sometimes. So yeah, I think that's probably a key difference from the other mentorships I've heard or they have experienced. I would say I would choose Lighting Bot Mentorship if I were to go back honestly and think about like the choices I made prior to this. If I had known or if this was a thing before I started school, I probably would not have gone to school and, dumped tens of thousands of dollars into something that just only taught me the basics, where this is a much more affordable option, and you're able to get very specialized focused training on an area, and and obviously I've improved much more quickly through that process than trying to like learn the very general things, very basic things. So I would say um, even if it feels like the price might be a bit scary, it's way better to get more focused and um, yeah, more focused training on this area than to just kind of like hope you pick it up through other things. Mm, I would say the material you are creating that's outside of the like actual one-on-one meets and projects and stuff. It's also very, very helpful. There's a lot of resources there. And so don't be intimidated by the amount of resources because they're not necessarily the longest videos in the world, so they're not that intimidating at that part. But I'd say yeah, there's a lot more resources outside of just the actual one-on-one meets and yeah, one-on-one meets and the personal projects.
This can be you. Thomas was on university and other mentorship, and it wasn't until he joined our mentorship that he finally succeeded after 3 months of following the guides and principles and doing the extra work. He also did one-on-one coaching and interview sessions as well. So please join and you'll get the opportunity as well to learn everything you need. Just go to courses.lightingbot.com.